So welcome back, and in this particular lecture we're going to talk about one of the issues that I encountered while we were setting all of this up, and that is of MIDI loops. MIDI loops occur because of course we're using cutting edge technologies here for audio-visual performance. When we're using controllers and so on and so forth, we're sending messages across wired and wireless networks. We're triggering things in different applications by using our templates that we've created in TouchOSE to fire off tracks in Remix Live, for example, and that's an example we're going to go through now. When I did actually create those TouchOSE templates, what happened was we were sending messages across the wired network, and because we wanted feedback from the application to tell us, well, this square is currently playing, for example, we needed feedback to come back from the app to say this has happened. This app is now, this pad is now playing. So we needed to be able to physically see that, so we knew what we were touching when we were using the TouchOSE template. So this in turn led to problems with feedback and creating MIDI loops. And the best way to show you that is probably to do an example. So here in Ableton Live, basic open new set, I'm going to double click here and create a MIDI loop. We're just going to scroll along here somewhere, and I'm going to create a note. Just going to elongate that note a little bit. I'm just going to make the clip a bit bigger, just so we give ourselves some space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press play on that. We can see it sending out a note once a bar. We can see it going around here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select MIDI to output, and I'm going to select the IAC driver bus, so that we're porting out that MIDI note on the IAC driver bus to channel 1. So we're going to go over to Remix Live. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this into MIDI learn. I'm going to MIDI learn from the IAC driver bus. And I'm going to select this pad here. That was the note. I turn it off. You can see it flashing there as the note tries to come in. So if we go into our preferences, we go into the IAC driver bus, and we can see, oh look, it's working. But we just saw it flash again. And we also see the IAC driver bus is constantly green. Why is that? Simply because we've got MIDI in and MIDI out selector for the IAC driver bus. So what it's doing is taking in a note that we're creating in Ableton Live, passing it back out. But it's passing it back out the IAC driver bus, so it's coming back in also on the IAC driver bus, and we've now created a massive MIDI loop of a feed around of data that never ends, simply. If I now take off MIDI out, we see it stopped. Note came on again, which turned off the pad. The note will fire again, and it turns on the pad. Because we're firing that note in such quick succession, it's turning it on and off very quickly as well. We can see that there. But if I select the MIDI out again and we wait for the note, here we see constantly green, which means it's constantly feeding in a loop. We can also see this if we go into this MIDI note in here and we take our ins. Actually, we'll need to turn on my preferences. I've already got that turned off. The IAC driver bus input, I turned it off not to create a loop in Ableton. And we can see the note is constantly coming in because you've got input selected in from the IAC driver bus as well. That's going to constantly do this. We can see it up in the top right hand corner here. It's just going to go mental. So obviously to avoid these things, we need to kill the MIDI loop. And we need to kill the MIDI loop simply so we're not constantly sending the same note over and over again. It will actually drive up your processor as well. It will consume your resources, and eventually if you've got enough of those, nothing is going to work correctly and the whole thing is just going to go kablooey. So keep an eye on those MIDI loops. Don't send stuff in and out. You need to make sure that you've got your control surfaces set up properly. You need to make sure that in software such as Remix Live, when you go into the preferences, that you don't have it MIDI in and MIDI out in a constant loop. You're going to have to do this for every app to make sure that they're all doing the same thing and none of them are causing you an issue. And as you can see, I've got quite a few here in this Ableton Live here already. So you just need to keep an eye on it, and as you add them in, you need to make sure what you're routing, where you're routing it, and how you're routing it to keep an eye on that and prevent your system from overloading. That's it for MIDI loops. Any questions, give me a shout in the forum. See you in the next lecture.